Okay, welcome back to members of 121 Community Church in Grapevine, Texas, and our ongoing study in the Theology of Paul the Apostle by James Dunn. We're going to take a look at pages 79 to 91. It's part 4 of the anthropology. Let's go to block 1 and we'll get started. Okay, let's go to block 1 and we're going to take a look at the human condition in need of redemption. And we look at the term used by Paul of kata sarx, according to the flesh. Romans 1:18 to 3:20, Paul offers a description of a fallen humanity. Man lives his life kata sarx, according to the flesh, in hostility toward God. And Paul says we are unable to please God, Romans 8:7 and 8. And we are in possession of a body of sin and death, Romans 6:6 and 7:24. So we live with a body of spiritual death that is a selfhood yet to be redeemed, in need of redemption, Romans 6 and 8. And then key, in Romans 1:18, Paul says that in our fallen state, we possess a disqualified mind. Adokimos nous, a disqualified mind. Another way to say it is in Ephesians 4, we possess and live according to a futility of the mind, a morally depraved mind. Paul is all about the mind. We need to be redeemed out of a morally depraved mind and put on a reborn mind, a new mindset. So let's go on to block 1, note 3. Our condition 1 is one of weakness and ungodliness. 5 aspects are listed in Ephesians 2, 1 through 3. Paul says you were dead in sins. You walked according with this world. You were enjoined to the spirit of disobedience. You conducted yourself in the passions of the flesh. You were children of wrath. That's his description of what he means by children of wrath. That's all listed in Ephesians 2, 1 through 3. Dead in sins, walking according to the world, enjoined with a spirit of disobedience, conducting one's self according to the passions of the flesh. Let's go on to block 2, and we take a specific look. We've got like a little bit of a theological introduction there in block 1. Now we're going to look at the fall and the dark side of human character. Let's go to block 2, note 1, and the Hebrew term Yetzer hara, and that stands for the evil impulse within. Paul takes the Jewish perspective and situates that Jewish perspective in Adam, and Paul uses Adam to represent all humanity. It is a generic concept for Paul that represents all of humanity. Adam is every man, every woman. Block 2, note 2, Adam's first disobedience is linked to the earth itself. Adam is used for all of humanity. Paul is speaking of a humankind as a whole. Adam is linked to the earth, and his disobedience results in the subjection of the earth to corruption and Adam is subjected to the necessity of hard labor concerning the earth. He is linked to the earth. Now, Block 2, Note 3, this first disobedience results in physical death and spiritual death. The tree of knowledge of good and evil, Adam is sternly ordered not to eat. Genesis 2:17. The fruit of the tree would make Adam think he was self-sufficient in his own eyes, not needing dependence on God. It would be the same thing as exalting the self and living according to selfhood. Egoism, in other words. We're talking about egoism. This disobedience will result in death and exclusion from the tree of life. Genesis 2:17. Being cut off from the access to life. Being cut off from all access to life, says Paul. Now, one interesting thing that Professor Dunn did here, he gives us a theological introduction of this anthropology in Block 1, and then he refreshes our memory concerning the actual fall event in Block 2. And now something he does that I think is interesting. In Block 3, he takes us to the intertestament period, that period of years between the Old and the New Covenant. And it's a period of time of writings of Jewish apocalyptic, and the writings during this intertestament period, although they're not scripture, they are important because they are rabbinic literature. We get a good look at the teaching of the rabbis in the synagogues when we look at the intertestament writings. And so it's important to look at them, and Paul does quote from them, so it does inform us about Paul's theology. But the intertestament writings are writings from Jewish rabbis that were circulated throughout the synagogues. The intertestament period and Jewish apocalyptic. And Dunn wants to begin with the book of Sirach. Sirach 15:14 says, God from the beginning made mankind and left him in the power of his own inclinations. And the word used there is a diaboulion, left man to his own discretion, his own counsel, his own deliberation. And then Sirach 17:1, the Lord created man out of the earth and turned him back unto it again, and gave man authority over all things. Authority over all things. Now, Sirach is dated to around 175 BC. And then I'd like this, Dunn takes us to Sirach 17:7. And I like that he takes us to Sirach 17:7. He made unto them the cunning of spirit. He filled their heart with understanding, showing them good and evil. So, according to rabbinic teaching, we have a term called the cunning of spirit. And I think that's really interesting because, remember, when we studied Hegel, Hegel's term was cunning of reason, the cunning of reason. And here we get from rabbinic teachings in Sirach a term cunning of spirit. That living according to the sovereignty of the eternal Logos. Now, Block 3, Note 2, we go to Sirach 17:25 to 18:14, where it describes, in the rabbinic literature, humanity as sinful and mortal. The human condition is not always traced back to disobedience and punishment. In Sirach 41, 1 through 4, death is the Lord's decree for all flesh. However, Dunn says there is an instance in Sirach 25 that says sin began with a woman and all die because of her. So there is two different aspects outlined in Sirach in the rabbinic teachings. And then he takes us to Block 3, Note 3. He takes us briefly to the Wisdom of Solomon, dated around 50 BC. And Paul does quote from the Wisdom of Solomon in Romans 1:18 through 2:6, and compare it to Wisdom 2:23 and 24, that says God created humankind for incorruption and made him in the image of his own eternity. But through the devil's envy, death entered into the world. That sounds like a perfect rabbinic recap of Genesis. But you have that found in the wisdom literature of around 50 BC. And it's wisdom. It's a Wisdom of Solomon 2:23 and 24. God created humankind for intended incorruption. He made him in the image of his own eternity, but through the devil's envy, death entered into the world. Satan entered into the world, and death entered into the world. So it's interesting, I think, that we get from Dunn that Paul was aware of the intertestament rabbinic literature as a student of Gamaliel, and one of the better students of Gamaliel. I mean, Gamaliel was recommending Paul to the Sanhedrin, to become a member of the Sanhedrin. God interrupted that recommendation with a visit on Damascus Road, where Paul was confronted by the blinding light of the Father. Then he heard the voice of the Son, and his heart was filled with the conviction of the Spirit. Paul encountered a triune saving event on Damascus Road, which completely altered his life, tremendously altered his life. He ended up being baptized in Damascus. He then retreated into the wilderness of Arabia for a 3-year period of time, quite a long time, 3 years. Then he went to Jerusalem. He interviewed Simon Peter. He interviewed James the Just. And then after those interviews, I feel like, I can't say it for certain, but knowing the personality of Paul, I'm pretty sure that he probably investigated the Q document, the Sayings of Christ document that was circulating in the early church. I'm sure he investigated that as well. And then he returned to Tarsus for postgraduate study work. And then only after all of those stages, only then did he return to Jerusalem around AD 51 to the First Ecumenical Council, where he was anointed as an apostle and commissioned as an apostle to the Gentiles at the First Ecumenical Council of Jerusalem. So it's very, very powerful here And we are told by Dunn that Paul, in his theology of the fallen state of mankind, does quote intertestament apocalyptic Jewish literature. He doesn't just quote from the Hebrew scriptures, he also quotes from the intertestament period of rabbinic writings. He's familiar with both. And I think that's really powerful. I love just as a recap, let's go to block 2, note 2 and 3, because I thought that was really interesting, that Adam's first disobedience is linked to the earth. Adam is used for all humankind. Paul speaks of humanity as a whole. Adam is linked to the earth, and Adam's disobedience results in the subjection of the earth to corruption, and Adam is subjected to the necessity of hard labor concerning the earth. Man is linked with finite earth, and both are subjected to corruption, hard labor. And then block 2, note 3, first disobedience results in physical death and spiritual death. The tree of knowledge of good and evil, Adam is ordered not to eat of it because that would make Adam think he was self-sufficient. It would be a evidence of egoism, that he would no longer need to be totally dependent on his Creator, that he would no longer need to be dependent on God himself. As a result of that, Adam is excluded from the tree of life. He is cut off from the access to life. Very, very powerful lesson on the doctrine of the fall. In block 1, we got a theological look at the fallen condition, and at this time Dunn went to Ephesians 2, 1 through 3, and then in block 2 we got a reminder of the event of the fall, and then block 3 we got a very good look at the intertestament writings of the rabbinic